2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Baltimore Positive back in Catonsville this week. We'll be with Sarah Heminger of Thread on Thursday, as well as Ben Jealous on Friday. And then on Sunday, the Baltimore Ravens will host the Arizona Cardinals. This guy has been covering all things Cardinals since Mr. Bidwell brought his team and his dream westward out to Sun Devil Stadium. I don't know if he ever sat out there on those aluminum benches in the sweltering heat, but I'm sure he did. Ken Summers has been the columnist at the Arizona Republic and AZ Central Sports for 34 years. You can follow his journey as well as Kent's Bottom out on Twitter at Kent Summers. That's Somers. Kent, a pleasure, man. I know you guys are bringing the Cardinal train in here this weekend, and we're seeing a bit of a rebuilding operation in progress coming in, right?
Yeah, no question about it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, 3 years outside the playoffs, coming off a 3-13 season, which might have been the team's worst since moving to Arizona in '88, and that's saying something because they've had a lot of bad football teams in that time.
Well, I'm aware. I remember when Mr. Bidwell was going to bring his team here back in the 80s and instead picked Arizona, or what Bob Irsay once called Azarona, after the third cocktail, I think, on the plane on the way back here. But, you know, we were all mixed up in that all these years later. You got a dome. You've been in Super Bowls. We've had a couple of parades. We have a Hall of Fame player that went home to play for the Arizona Cardinals, and we'll see this week in Terrell Suggs. But, you know, it's been a different kind of operation there recently. I've always felt like Bidwell didn't know what he was doing when they got there, and I felt like the ship kind of got righted 15 years ago, and I was kind of shocked to see them miss on the Wilkes thing. And then, I mean, in the history of the NFL, I mean, a whole lot of guys only last 1 year, certainly in the modern era. What's going on there? What went wrong, and I guess what needs to go right? It's pretty unorthodox hire in the case of Cliff Kingsbury from the outside.
Yeah, you know, they went the orthodox way a year ago, hired Steve Wilkes, who had come up through the ranks, you know, as a secondary coach, defensive coordinator, et cetera. Well thought of in the league. His former players loved him. I thought it was a solid hire. You know, talking to Steve Wilkes, you just got a good vibe from him that this guy knew what he was doing. And it turns out he didn't. And in fairness to him, he was saddled with an awful roster. It's an organization under general manager Steve Keim that's just missed on too many draft picks during Keim's whole 7 years as GM, but especially over the last 3 years. And 4 of his 7 picks, first-round picks, are elsewhere. And it's really come back to haunt him. It's not a very talented roster. It's certainly not a very deep roster, and it's going to take more than a year to pull out of it.
Well, certainly this week, you know, when does a tie feel like a win when you're losing 24-6 in the fourth quarter, right? Like, that was kind of an amazing little spurt. That kind of gets them to practice a little earlier this week. I mean, they certainly were capable of doing things at the end of the game that they looked inept in the first 3 quarters, right?
Yeah, no question about it. Cliff Kingsbury said, look, I got too cute. I you know, had all summer to design plays and to think of that first game, and I just had Kyler Murray, a quarterback, with doing way too much. I need to concentrate more on getting him comfortable early in the game. I think there's an element of truth to that. I also think it's Kingsbury covering a bit for his players. I mean, there were things that Kyler Murray had open in the first 3 quarters that he just missed, and you know, they just didn't play very well on offense. In fact, they were horrible. And fourth quarter, Kyler Murray gets on a roll. The Lions get a little tired. The Lions do, for you know, what they've done really for the last 50 years and blow football games. And the Cardinals, yeah, I think felt very fortunate to get out of there with a tie.
Well, obviously with the Ravens, we're selling a different program. I'm up at 1 o'clock in the morning watching Joe Flacco flail around on Monday night out in the dirt in Oakland. And we've had a new program here with Lamar Jackson. We're going to do RPO, and we're going to do things differently. And our quarterback's going to seek contact with linebackers like Terrell Suggs. In the case of Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, the sale to the fan base there that has bought all these tickets, different than it was 20 years ago when nobody cared. It feels like everybody cares out there to a large degree and how bad things were last year. But Josh Rosen last year, Kyler Murray this year, there's been a lot of indecision there. And I guess until it's proven, if you're a fan out there, maybe you stay away on Sunday.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think people are approaching this season with a more of an attitude of, okay, you've got to prove it to me after I've suffered through last year's debacle. But I also think people are very excited about Kyler Murray and what he and Cliff Kingsbury have brought here, or what they might have brought here. You know, two bold moves by Cardinals management, by Michael Bidwell and Steve Keim in the offseason. We'll see if it pays off. I think Kyler Murray is going to be a very good professional quarterback. I think he's smart. He's definitely has the arm strength, and we all know how quick and fast he is. And what I've liked about him, so the little time I've been around him, he's very even-keeled, and as a runner and a mobile quarterback, he's very smart at getting down and not taking the big hits. He's a guy who is not going to seek out contact. He's already said, "Look, I don't like to get hit, and I'm going to avoid it, you know, whenever I go on the run."
Kent, you've been there a long time, and I'm taking a deeper dive in things I'm doing around here. I'm 50 now. This is my 29th year on Baltimore Sports Radio, and we've had the football team now 24 years. You're 34 years in Arizona, and we have statues here now for Johnny Unitas and Ray Lewis. We've spanned the generations here. The baseball team is such a turd that I don't even talk about them anymore, and I can get to Adam Jones with you before this thing's over with. We can talk a little bit about that. But in all of these years, you've seen baseball, football, hockey come to the Valley. Nothing quite like Fitzgerald, though, right? Like, for all of the sports and whatever Randy Johnson was and Kurt Schilling and Gonzalez and their success with the DBs or whatever, even the Suns and Larry Nance and Barkley was there for a minute and Dan Marley, they got sports bars and all that stuff. Fitzgerald is larger than life there in that way. The reason you would want a sports franchise there is to have the kind of player and person that he's been to sort of represent the community, right?
Yeah, and he's definitely the most popular athlete, since I've been here, and probably in the State's history, and really probably the most popular sports figure. I mean, you probably have to go back to Frank Kush, Arizona State's old coach, to find somebody, this popular among people. And it's been well earned. I mean, he stayed with this franchise. He's re-signed here when he's had the opportunity or the chances to go elsewhere. And at age 36, there's still a lot left. I mean, last week he had 2 catches of more than 40 yards, and that hadn't happened since the 2015 season. And he's especially dangerous at home. I mean, I think the Ravens have to feel fortunate they don't have to come here, because Kingsbury and Kyler Murray seem to realize that, where some other people in recent history haven't, that how much Fitzgerald can electrify a home crowd. And yeah, I mean, he's one of those one-name guys, at least in this state. It's, you mentioned Larry, and everybody knows who you're talking about. So a lot of the other people you mentioned, I think, have approached that kind of level, but haven't reached it. The Luis Gonzalez's, the Charles Barkleys, et cetera. But yeah, no question. It's going to be a sad day around here when Larry Fitzgerald finally retires.
Well, the longevity's never there, too, and a lot of the guys that come in Arizona have taken a paycheck and come for sunshine, or they grow up there, whatever it is, or only stay 10 minutes, like Schilling, right? He sort of spanned the generations, and more than that, man, I look up, 8 catches, 113 yards on Sunday, so he's still the best football player on the field, right?
Yeah, he certainly is, especially with Patrick Peterson, their cornerback, suspended for the first 6 games of the season. So, I mean, for a guy, I think he had 2 catches for 6 yards through 3 quarters, and then just pretty much took the game over in the fourth quarter and overtime. And it reminded me a lot of what he did in the playoffs in 2008, what he did again in when they beat the Packers in overtime in that great games. I mean, he just loves the big moment. And at age 36, he's still capable of coming through in those times. And like I said, I think they went through some times the last 2 or 3 years where they didn't even have the quarterback that could get him the ball, or a coach that seemed to realize that Larry could still do that at that level. And I think Kyler Murray learned, if he learned anything, is last Sunday, when I'm in trouble, I'm going to throw it up to number 11. And those 50-50 balls, he makes them about 80-20 in the Cardinals' favor.
And then the crowd goes wild. Kent Summers joining us here, columnist for the Arizona Republic and AZ Sports Central. You can find him out on Twitter at Kent Summers. That's Somers. Only 34 years of Valley wisdom coming with him. And, you're there long enough that the Cardinals were really a joke, a punchline. Buddy Ryan, you got a winner in town. Sony Case, my dear friend, all the things. I remember Dwayne Stark signing out there at one point. Suggs always has wanted to be there, has always wanted to play there. We always thought he would go there. I remember interviewing him 15 years ago. He's not my favorite Raven. He's probably my least favorite Raven ever. But I remember interviewing him. He always aspired to that. I remember, talking to folks aligned with Arizona State about what a legend he was out there. And now, at the end, he's come back to write this last chapter for himself of what I think is going to be a Hall of Fame career. 2 sacks already. I have a feeling we will see 55 running around a little bit out here, and he will come here specifically this week with something to prove.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think it helps him playing Baltimore early in the season before he's, necessarily worn down. I do think through the season, the Cardinals are going to have to manage his snaps. They did that a little bit last week with Brooks Reed taking over for Suggs here and there and giving him a breather. But yeah, he played very well, and I think they're hoping he brings not only a veteran presence to that defensive side of the ball, but a pass rusher who can take some of the heat off Chandler Jones on the other side. And if they have one thing going for them on defense right now, it's probably those 2 guys. It's a unit that's dealt with some pretty severe losses here in the preseason, from Patrick Peterson's suspension to defensive tackle Darius Philon getting arrested outside of a strip club and then getting cut. It's been a series of hits on that side of the ball. So they need Suggs to play well, especially early in the season. And for one game he did, but you still have to wonder, 37 years old, how long can he keep it up? But yeah, it was not drafting him was a moment we all remember in Cardinals history, really a terrible moment that's pointed to the futility of the organization at that time, and supposedly they were afraid Suggs was, had too many people following him around at home, that he wouldn't be able to separate himself from friends.
We had a terrible incident at a gym, before the draft. He did a lot of stupid things while he was here that the organization covered for, the bleach and the. I mean, I watched the antics here for 16 years. He's my least favorite football player that ever wore a Ravens jersey. I mean, through the course of time. That being said, Kent, I might be the guy having to put him in the Hall of Fame 8 years from now, or whenever the time comes to stand in front of everybody. He's a Hall of Fame. I mean, never bet against him. I mean, we're talking about Achilles injuries. He's superhuman in that way, and how much he loves football. And I don't think even Ray Lewis knew that 7 or 8 years ago that he'd still be hanging around doing this at this level, this far gone, with that much money in the bank.
Yeah, and it is. It's been an incredible career, and a lot of Cardinal fans rue the day where they passed on him, and still blame Bill Bidwell and others for basically saying you didn't want to pay a top 10 pick. That's why you traded down and got a couple of picks later in the draft. So yeah, who knows how it would have worked out here? And he has said when he signed here, it was probably best all around that he did get drafted elsewhere, that he went to Baltimore and landed in that place and had some players influence him here that, the Cardinals didn't have in place during that time. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's a 1-year deal. He's a lot like Fitzgerald at that age, as he's in the mode of, I'm going to take it year by year. He isn't committing to anything beyond this season. And really the Cardinals don't want to commit to him beyond this season, but maybe he'll give him something. Maybe he'll be able to do exactly what he did last Sunday, not 2 sacks a week, but, occasionally bring pressure here and there, and especially in key moments as they try to close out games.
Man, I can't have you on and have you say those 2 words, Frank Kush, without getting into some sort of conversation with you about that. Now, I went out about 10 years ago. I had an idea to write a book, maybe 11 years ago, and I never finished it. I'm a finisher. Most of the projects I've ever started in my life, when I say it, I do it. This was one of the things I never finished because it just never got finished. I had an idea to talk to Baltimore-connected coaches, anyone who'd ever coached or touched Baltimore. So, I'm going Schnellenberger, Shula. That's just on the football side. On the baseball side, the Davy Johnsons and the Earl Weavers, and just this incredible mind that left Baltimore. And I'm talking Marvin Lewis, Jack Del Rio, lots of people that coached here. And I went out and sat with Frank Kush at the old Sun Devil Stadium, where he had a skybox office up on the roof. And I had to go past the Terrell Suggs and the Todd Heap stuff in the lobby there in Tempe. And I went up and I sat with Frank Kush for about an hour and a half. And he had a little Colts pencil display, a Colt helmet with all of his pencils and pens on it, and I have a picture of he and I. But we sat there and talked about life and him growing up in Pennsylvania, and he said something that stuck with me, Kent, and I still have the tape in the video. You can go see it on YouTube. It's about a half an hour, 45 minutes worth of chatting about Bob Irsay's drunken nonsense and moving the team. You know, all the stuff that you'd want to talk to Frank Kush if you were a 14-year-old kid as I was when Frank Kush was doing My Way or the Highway ads here when he came in here with that lousy football team and Bob Irsay. But he said to me, I said to him, what's the most important thing to becoming a successful football coach? Because I was asking about coaching philosophy. I was going to write a philosophy book, given all these people. And he said, they got to fear you. They got to be scared to death. If they're not afraid of you, they'll never work for you. And I thought, wow, man, that is a 1945 philosophy there now, right? I don't think Terrell Suggs is afraid of Cliff Kingsbury this week, but I found it to be a fascinating conversation with Frank Kush, and he was wonderful to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy who's just bigger, than life here. God rest his soul. I mean, he's still has an influence over that university. The field's named after him there. I mean, he's still very much revered here, but probably not suited to coach in this day and age. Certainly not in the NFL. Look, this is a whole other conversation, obviously, but I think there are a lot of different ways to coach. I think one of the key things is players have to sense that there's, that you're sincere, that the guy that's talking to them is real. You're not putting on airs. You're not somebody different once you leave the room, et cetera. They have to believe you're real. And, I don't know that Bill Belichick has buddy-buddy relationships with many of his players, but, what you see is what you get. And, the longer you're around the NFL, you realize that's not often the case, either with the coach or the player's point of view. So I think all players want, or a lot of times what they want, is just honesty. Don't sell me a bill of goods. And, Frank Kush as a college coach was able to do that with kids. It was just, I think if you were able to sit down and for a conversation with Kush like you had and like I did on an occasion or two, he was a very likable guy, and I could see why a lot of his former players revere him. And
you could see why mom and dad would send a kid to go play for him, right? He's going to take care of my boy, right?
You had to get past that crusty exterior and him yelling at you and making life hard if you were a player to understand that side of him. And I looking at I don't know if I would have wanted to play for him if I had any ability, or if I would have wanted my kids to.
Well, it's fascinating, and that you brought up Frank Kush being larger than life out there, and I think the people of Baltimore maybe don't know that, because his cup of coffee here was a cup of coffee here, you know what I mean? But out there is a whole different thing. Kent Summers joining us here, longtime columnist, and I'd be remiss if I don't let you talk a little bit about Adam Jones coming out there, because we love Adam Jones around here, but the Diamondbacks in general, it's tough being a columnist in the Valley right now. Not a lot of prosperity going on, right?
No, the Suns stink. The Diamondbacks have been mediocre most of the season, although they've been on a little bit of a roll in September and gotten into wild card contention. The hockey team has been average. Certainly the Cardinals wasn't very much to write about a year ago. But, Adam Jones has been a nice addition for the Diamondbacks. He played a lot early in the season. I think he got worn down a little bit, started to slump a little bit, and their manager, Torey Lovello, started giving him some more days off. He became not such a regular in the lineup. I think it's helped him. He's rejuvenated. He's played well over the last month, and he's really helped in the clubhouse. For a team that lost some leadership, especially when Paul Goldschmidt was sent to the Cardinals. They needed somebody like that, and it wouldn't surprise me if he returns for another year here.
Feels like a pennant race, though, right? I mean, they are really, really bunched up in the National League, a little more so, certainly than the American League. And, come on, man. I got 100 or 104 losses. I don't know which one. It's kind of like you covering the Cardinals. Once they're 2-9 or whatever they're going to be, it's not going to be all that interesting. But for a baseball season in September, the Diamondbacks have a chance. They're in it, right?
Yeah, and that's you look at it and what they've done. It's somewhat remarkable. As I said, they traded Goldschmidt in December. They traded Zach Greinke, their best pitcher, a month ago. They didn't re-sign some of their key free agents like Patrick Corbin, a left-handed pitcher. They told fans, look, we're not tearing it down. We're going to rebuild. We're going to try to restock our minor leagues, and all the while remain competitive. So I think, as you look at it and think, okay, they're above 500 right now. They're not, they're way behind the Dodgers for the division title, of course, but yeah, they're in the hunt, albeit for a wild card spot. And given everything that's gone on in the last year, I think that's pretty good. The key is, have they restocked? Do they have young players coming up who are really going to help them and turn it around? And we're seeing some indications of that already. So it's been a really successful September, and that's a stark contrast to a year ago where they entered the month with the division lead and then just collapsed.
You got Marvin and Herm keeping you busy there on Saturdays over in Tempe too. So you got that happening with Arizona State.
Yeah, that's always fun talking to Herm, and then to have Marvin over there, it's a great story. They're really trying to run that operation like an NFL franchise, and Marvin Lewis was brought in there as a consultant. I think as a guy that Herm Edwards can close the door and complain to and run ideas by.
I've done that with Marvin privately plenty times too.
Yeah, and I think, from what I've heard, Marvin Lewis is really enjoying it. He's not out on the recruiting trail, but he's showing up to the office every day at 6:30, and it's about football for him. And I think he's really enjoyed being around younger people.
Well, I will catch up with him at some point when he makes a little time. I keep forgetting he's got like a job. I think he's just out there with his feet in the pool. But then I read all this stuff, that it's football season. I guess for the next 10, 12, 14 weeks, however long they hang in there, it'll be football season for him. He almost took the Notre Dame job a long time ago. People don't know that he almost went backwards to college. He never went back. So I guess there's a little opportunity for him to have a little fun. I'll catch up with him later. It was great to catch up with you. I hope you don't eat any tourist crab cakes when you come in here this week, and we don't see you very often, every 8 years or every 4, but we get to come out there. I like it more when I get to come to Arizona, Kent.
Yeah, just as long as it's not September. If it's September, you want the game to be in Baltimore.
Just as long as Carson Palmer's not running it up on us like the last time. So we probably won't have that problem this week. Ken, I appreciate you making time. Thanks for being a great guest.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Kent Somers from the Arizona Republic. That's Somers, one M, like Suzanne, sort of, but one, right. Columnist for the Arizona Republic and AZ Central Sports. Been there 34 years, covering all things out in Phoenix and in Arizona. You can find me out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app, becoming crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Shout out to our friends at Brookshoff for taking me up in the Goodyear blimp on Tuesday. Put the pictures up, put the video up. Bucket list checked off. There you go. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat where I put pictures of me riding around in the Goodyear blimp. And last but never least, if you want breaking news, it all comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. You'll hear that on Sunday morning. I will be a part of that madness as well. Baltimore Positive in Catonsville this week with Sarah Heminger of Thread on Thursday at Jennings Cafe in Yomps. Get over there and get me a Jennings burger. Friday morning, chicken and waffles. That's what I'm going to have. Maybe I'll have a Chesapeake Benedict. I don't know. Maybe I'll have both. State Fair will be at Catonsville with Ben Jealous on Friday morning. Next Thursday, back at Fadley's, Lexington Market, for those delicious crab cakes, French fries, and the coleslaw and iced tea. Be there with City Council President Brandon Scott talking about the future of our city and Baltimore Positive, which I am. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.